Hello, future leaders of audiology. Welcome to Austin, and be prepared for the heat that's going to be down here this weekend. And I hope you guys have a great time. My name is Brad Shields, and I am the lobbyist and representative for the Texas Academy of Audiology here in Austin. And I handle their legislative needs and monitoring of all the activities that go on here at Austin. Sorry I can't be with you in person today. I have been in the past, and I'm sorry I won't be able to be here today. By the time you're watching this, I will be in Washington, D.C., and working up there for about a week. So I'm sorry I can't join you, and thank you for allowing me to provide this update to you via video. And I hoped to be able to kind of articulate to you what it is that a lobbyist does for the profession of audiology and for TAA. And I'm going to give you an update as to what it is that I do for TAA and what hopefully that you can perhaps start doing in the future. In full disclosure, I have a lobby firm here in Austin called Texas Legislative Associates. We have a number of lobbyists that work here in the firm, and we represent a variety of clients ranging from other healthcare practitioners to businesses with tax issues, as well as counties and municipalities that need to have an eye on what's going on at the legislature. So, but I have enjoyed working with TAA for many years and look forward to being able to continue to do that into the future. The legislature, in fact, has just adjourned a couple of weeks ago, and they had been in session for 5 months. I'm going to let you know how things went there. And but I wanted to be able to sort of give you a sense as to what the environment is like that we have to deal with. The legislature meets for 5 months every other year. Now, when the founding fathers of Texas drafted the Constitution, they envisioned something referred to as a citizen legislature. And what they wanted were ordinary, everyday people to be elected to the legislature, to come to Austin, work on legislation, pass bills, new laws, and then they wanted them to go home and live under those laws as regular citizens for the next year and a half before they came back to Austin. Frankly, I think this is a marvelous process. It gives people a different perspective on what the impact of those laws will be. It's different than the way they do it in California, New York, and other states where they have a full-time legislature. And those people are in office all the time and in legislative sessions all the time. And sometimes I feel like they lose perspective on what it's like to live under the rules that they pass when they don't have to go home and be regular citizens and have regular jobs and things like that. So that's why the legislature is here and just left. What I'd like to do now is to kind of give you a summary of the 4 kinds of chores that I do on behalf of TAA, and let you know what's going on. Now, my first responsibility for you is to be your eyes and ears in Austin, and this is kind of imperative because while you're at home practicing audiology and building your practice and staying involved in your profession, the legislature can be down here working, and unless you know what's going on, you're not going to have a full impact as to what that is going to mean for you. So I provide services as I say, eyes and ears for the profession, and what that means is that during a legislative session, they will file probably about 7,000 bills that have to do with, everything from plumbing to agriculture. And not all of those bills impact audiology, and certainly not all of those bills will pass. But every single one of them needs to be monitored. So my staff and the folks here in the building, we will read the caption of every single one of those 7,000 bills. That's the opening line that kind of tells you what the bill does. So we'll read every single one of those. And if we should find that a bill does potentially have the impact on the profession of audiology or on your patients, we'll sort of set that bill aside and add it to what we call as a tracking list. And we pay for a service that we use that allows us to electronically add bills to a tracking list. And then we can print out that or access that list anytime we need to find out what's been going on. So once we've identified a bill, we'll put it on a tracking list. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is the second part of my job is to advocate. And advocate will take on various meanings as necessary. First thing we're going to do is, as we identify bills that have been filed that perhaps might have an impact on your profession, we will go visit with that legislator's office. We'll go talk to their staff. We'll ask them where the idea came from, whether or not some other profession brought it to them, whether or not it was a constituent that requested it, whether or not it was an idea of their own and they're trying to solve a problem. And that's obviously what we'll try to do with them is to find out what problem they're trying to solve, whether or not their solution is an appropriate solution or one that makes sense. Perhaps we can offer some insights as to how that solution might be tailored so as to cause less harm. But we'll go visit with those authors and let them know that the Texas Academy of Audiology has an interest in that legislation, and we'll work together. The third part of my job, well, back to the advocacy part, I'm sorry. Each one of those bills that are filed, some of them will move forward. Some of them will actually get a hearing before the legislature in a committee. And once that occurs, if it's a bill that TAA does have a position on and may want to offer some solutions to those problems, then we will recruit expert testimony from the TAA's leadership. We'll have folks come down and testify in front of the committee. We'll let the folks know what concerns we have with it, what recommendations we have. We'll certainly let everybody know that we're working with the author in an open fashion so as to be fair in the process. But expert testimony is certainly part of our advocacy that we will bring as needed. Also, part of advocacy is the possibility of bringing forth our own ideas, our own initiatives. Some of you may remember that during the last legislative session 2 years ago, TAA did bring forth a bill to solve a problem that patients were having with insurance. Interestingly enough, patients were finding that many of their health plans were not, in fact, covering the cost of hearing instruments, whether that's hearing aids or cochlear implants. And we're getting letters from insurance saying, no, I'm sorry, we don't find that to be medically necessary. Or in fact, they might have even said that it was somewhat cosmetic. So we took that issue to the legislature, and we found a couple of legislators, a House member and a Senate member, to file a bill that would mandate insurance companies cover hearing devices, both hearing aids and cochlear implants, for children below the age of 18. And so that bill found very favorable environment in the legislature. I think the insurance companies decided not to oppose it. And we were able to pass that bill through both the House and the Senate, and the governor signed that bill. Now, that was a great effort on part of TAA, and I think it was something we did that was very beneficial for your patients. I have to point out, though, it wasn't a perfect solution because many of the insurance plans here in Texas are what they call ERISA plans. And these are self-funded insurance plans that are regulated by the federal government. And so passing state law does not mandate what they have to do. But we were able to bring this mandate to all of the insurance plans that are regulated by the state of Texas and the Department of Insurance. But it's nonetheless, it was still a very helpful bill. We're still having some issues with implementation. We're still getting patients complaining that some insurance companies haven't gotten caught up on the new law, and we're providing them with the necessary help to find ways to file complaints with the Department of Insurance or the proper language to use when they're communicating with their insurance companies. So this legislative session, we kind of decided to take it a step further and solve yet another problem. Some insurance companies who did in fact include coverage for hearing devices would set an amount that they were willing to cover for that product, and in fact found a product that they would pay for that would meet that requirement. Unfortunately, they may have set a reimbursement rate or a cost of maybe $500 to $1,000 for a hearing device. Obviously, many parents of children and many individuals would want to have a hearing device with far more advanced technology or capability or durability, and would find another brand at a higher cost that they would prefer to have. Oddly enough, some of the insurance companies were in fact denying claims, saying that if you don't take the particular product that we cover and we cover that cost, then we're going to deny your claim, even though the parents were willing to pay the difference for the higher cost product out of pocket. So what we did was we drafted a bill here in Texas called Freedom of Choice of Hearing Aids, and got that filed in the legislature. That bill will mandate that insurance companies may not deny a claim based upon the fact that the patient chose a higher cost product than what they had covered, as long as the patient was willing to pay for the difference out of pocket. And that bill received an excellent sponsor, Representative Julie Johnson from the Dallas area. She worked very hard on the bill. She got the bill passed unanimously out of the House Insurance Committee. The bill went to the floor of the House and was approved unanimously in the House. Unfortunately, the bill got bogged down in the Senate and did not get out of the Senate Insurance Committee, and we ran out of time by the end of the session. Partly that's because it took us a while to get the bill drafted and get the bill filed. We got a late start. But frankly, I think we made a lot of progress, and this is a bill that we will prioritize during the next legislative session, and hopefully we'll get that bill filed much sooner and we'll get that bill passed, because it really didn't have any opposition from the health plans, as long as they were assured that there wasn't going to be any additional cost to the health plans. So those were that was one of the initiatives that we undertook this legislative session, and we didn't pass, but we made great progress. And many times these issues do take more than one legislative session to get passed. My third responsibility as your lobbyist is in the area of reporting, and so all during the legislative session, the tracking report that I mentioned that had all of the bills that audiology found to be worth following, we would create that report and we would send it to the leadership of TAA once a week. And I think they posted those on their websites, and you were able to track legislation during the session. Any bills of interest that did get hearings and had some, we would certainly put out legislative updates to TAA and let them know what the discussions were and what our positions were on those issues. And of course, once the legislative session ended, Then we would do our legislative wrap-up document that we put out. Summarized all the bills that had and all the bills did not pass that we were following, because frankly, we need to pay as much attention to the bills that did not pass as the ones that did pass, because if somebody felt strongly enough to file a bill, even though it didn't pass, more than likely the problem still persists, and that they may in fact come back next legislative session and file the bill again. So this is a great opportunity for us to use the next year to meet with those organizations, to meet with those legislators who wanted a bill passed, and work with them on their issues, see if we can make suggestions on how to solve their problems without necessarily creating any kind of an adverse effect for the practice of audiology or your patients. So we will continue to do that throughout the next year or so. The fourth area of work that we do is one that's often overlooked by some folks, which is the agency work. Now, you need to understand that once the legislature has finished and they pass bills that impact the practice, those bills will then travel over to the state agencies that regulate audiology for them to create rules and regulations that will implement those new changes. Now, many of you may remember that a few years ago, speech language pathologists and audiologists were regulated by the Texas State Board of SLP and Audiology, with all of those board members appointed by the governor. And it was a standalone, separate state agency that just regulated speech language pathologists and audiologists. There had been an effort over the past several years to do away with many of those independent standalone agencies and consolidate them under one regulatory authority. TAA understood and participated in the discussion a few sessions ago that moved the regulation of SLPs and audiologists over to the Texas Department of Licensure and Regulation, TDLR. And that's been a very successful transition, and people have found it to be very receptive and very responsive to public needs. So we will be taking the bills that pass this legislative session, following them over to TDLR, meeting with the staff over there, meeting with the advisory committee made up of speech language pathologists and audiologists to make sure they understand what the legislative intent was, what the agreements were, and how to turn those into rules and regulations. It is so much easier to help them draft new rules and regulations, offering our advice and offering our understanding of what the legislature had intended, than it is to do nothing and wait for the rules to be published later this summer that are completely incorrect or wrong from the legislative perspective, and to try to go back in and change them. So we will spend some time with the staff over there articulating to them the difference between may and shall as it was written in the law and such like that. So that is part of the fourth effort that we will make on your behalf, which is to go work with the various legislative agencies to make sure things are implemented the way they were intended to. What I'd like to do now is to review with you some of the bills that did pass this legislative session and some of the ones that did not. I picked just a handful to give you a flavor of the kind of things that were done. The first bill that passed of interest, House Bill 80 by Representative Ortega out of El Paso. She passed a bill that would require the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to do a study and report back to the legislature regarding the shortages of certain healthcare professions. And in the list of professions that she mentioned, she specifically mentioned audiologists and SLPs to find out if there is, in fact, the danger of a shortage of those providers. This will have a great effect if there is a developing shortage on Medicaid access to care, general patient access to care, and whether or not the Higher Education Coordinating Board should consider approving more programs, approving more curriculum throughout the state to make it more accessible to students. So we'll be reporting back to you on the status of that report, and we'll certainly volunteer to participate in that study as well. Second bill that did pass was House Bill 125 by Representative Martinez from down in the valley in Weslaco. This was in response to some concerns that health practitioners were having for their personal information and access to those items. This would prohibit a licensing agency from publishing the home addresses and emails and phone numbers of any of the licensed professionals of that agency. We have seen protests in the past as it relates to abortion. We've seen protests for the death sentence, and certain health professionals have been vulnerable to some of those protests getting a little too close to home. So this law would try to keep some of that information more private and less accessible to the public. The third bill I had identified was House Bill 706 by Representative Bernal from San Antonio. And this is a bill that would require the Medicaid program to provide to schools through the SHARS program for services provided by an audiologist in a school. Now, we're all hopefully aware that Medicaid reimbursement for audiology services is pretty dismal, but at least this will increase access to those kind of services that are identified in schools, and where schools provide those services, they can seek reimbursement from Medicaid through the SHARS program, which helps pay for those services provided to Medicaid eligible children in schools. And we're always concerned about the quality of those services, and we'll be working with TEA on those issues. But hopefully this will expand access to care for Medicaid eligible students. And then the last bill that did pass was by House Bill 2255 by Representative Darby from San Angelo. And his bill would require that newborn and infant hearing screening results be shared with the patients and the parents of the children. Those we've known in the past that when those hearing screenings have been done, if the test indicated that they would be referred to services, but not always are the test results provided to the parents, and this would make those accessible. And now, what I'm going to move on to now is just three bills that did not pass, and just so that you can see the kind of things that we're having to deal with. House Bill 2237 by Representative Goldman out of Fort Worth would have required audiologists who fit and dispense hearing aids follow the same rules as fitters and dispensers. Now, this is a bill that never got a hearing, and it never really got discussed. And we did indicate our interest in the bill to Representative Goldman's office, but we're still not surely aware of what problem he was trying to solve, who asked for this bill. This is something that we will be visiting with his office further about. We'll be following up to find out if there was a problem that he needed to resolve that we'll be working on. And we'll follow up and keep track of that one. Senate Bill 895 by Senator Zaffirini. This is an interesting bill. Now, as you're well aware, in the hearing loss community, there's not always fully agreement on solutions. on how to approach some services that are available and which should be prioritized. There's an organization called Lead K that has a particular bias and an agenda that they want to push for. They have filed for legislation mandating the acquisition of language skills in schools. And this particular session, they did not file that bill, but they did file a bill that was more built towards the future. This particular bill would have required school districts to report data relating language acquisition for children 8 years of age or younger to the Texas Education Agency. And then as that data is collected, it would provide some information that could be used for future legislative considerations. That bill, even though it was pretty much agreed to, did not pass. And I suspect that we will continue to see those discussions continue over time. The final bill that didn't pass was the one that we've already talked about, House Bill 2658 by Representative Johnson from Dallas. This is our freedom of choice of a hearing device, a bill that would have allowed patients to choose a hearing device that cost more than the coverage of an insurance plan, so long as the patient was willing to pay out of pocket for the difference. That bill did not pass, but I feel confident that this is a bill that will pass following the next legislative session. So as you can see, it's fairly imperative that those of you who are involved in a health profession to stay involved in the legislative process. And that's why I am so delighted that you guys are here in Austin. You are showing an interest in leadership, and hopefully that will mean that you will spend a certain amount of your time and your talent in the future defending your practice. Audiology desperately needs to have people who will be involved in the leadership and in the future of the profession. You need to stand up and defend your practice at the legislature. And hopefully I'll be part of that in the future, and I look forward to doing that. Again, thank you again for being in Austin. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for showing an interest in your profession. It's desperately needed, and we appreciate your efforts. I am sorry that I'm not able to be there live to answer your questions. I am more than delighted to answer any of your questions. If you want to email me, my email address is brad@bradshields.com. Please send me an email. I would be delighted to converse with you that way. Or if you ever want to come to Austin and visit with me personally, I am here for you if that's what you'd like. Have a great day. Thank you again for letting me join you, and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you guys so much, and have a good day.